If you are just joining us, we did have a little bit of an issue with internet, and I think that we are on and we're good to go now.
It's 3:00, so we'll get started.
We'll start officially. So my name is Melissa Tosetti, and I am the founder of The Savvy Life.
And I'm Kevin Gibbons, and I'm the VP of The Savvy Life and a cash flow planner.
And what The Savvy Life is it is the name of our business, but it is the process and the idea of building a strong financial foundation while enjoying the journey, and doing that by being very purposeful with where you spend your time and where you spend your money. And in that, we're going to actually be talking about that idea of purposefulness from the perspective of, do you lead a life that you can afford? Meaning, do you create your spending plan around what you can afford, or do you strive to you can describe it better because you just wrote the article on it. Or do you strive to
find a way to afford the life that you want to live? So it's really a question of, and the answer, of course, is this is not an either or. So it's skipping ahead of
there's no right answer
to the punchline. Well, there is a right answer. The right answer is being purposeful and planning and making sure that what you're doing is what you really want to do. All right.
There is no right answer for the populace. There is a right answer for you.
Correct.
Right.
There you go. It is not an either or. So the real issue is, you can say, I make X amount of dollars a year. This is the lifestyle I can afford. I'm going to live that life and I'm going to be happy with what I can do. Or you can say, you know what? I really want to live here. I really want to be able to do these things. How can I make enough money so that I can do those things? And what we're going to talk about today is where you fall on that spectrum and how you make life decisions to satisfy either and or both of those paths.
So this is actually very timely because last Friday I was in Denver doing a presentation for executive assistants on the idea of living a savvy life. And in my past life, I was an office manager and actually an executive assistant. And there's a certain level of Jones syndrome and a certain level of social pressure that is very easy to fall into in those type of environments. And I'm not talking about just the administrative staff. I'm talking about if you work in an environment, your peers, so you have that level of, gosh, what should my life look like? And you're comparing it to the other two people around you versus, well, what do you want? And I think that is a big piece of this particular conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are certain professions and certain career paths where this can really be amplified. In fact, so much so that there's a lot of our entertainment industry is based around it. Devil Wears Prada and a couple other movies and things like that really kind of emphasize this whole idea of, if you're in this business field, you need to look a certain way. You need to have these accoutrements. You need to have this type of car, belong to these clubs, go eat at these restaurants. And again, if that's something that is of value to you personally, then figure out how to do it. If that's not of value to you, spend your money where you want to spend it. Spend your money wisely. And that's really what this whole, again, the whole purpose of the Savvy Life is talking about how to spend your money wisely and how to live the life you want to live.
So back in the day when the idea of this business was still being formed in my head, and it in no way looked like what it looks like now. It's wonderful how things evolve. But I was always attracted to people that did things in their own terms or did things a little different. And there was an ebook, talk about how long ago this was. It was an ebook that came out, and it was called The Rat Race Remedy. And it was the idea of how we are kind of fall into this doctrine that this is what life needs to look like. And I always felt from a very early age, well, that's what your life could look like, but what else, what I love about the internet now is that there are so many different examples of people living life on their terms. And whether that is, hey, I'm going to build a little tiny house out in the country and it's going to allow me to, do the work that I really love doing. And that it's an ends to means, or it is I really want to travel around the world, and I want to do it, and I have it look like this, and so I'm going to work to play.
Yes. Yeah, and that's really
Yeah.
that I think I framed that in the article that I wrote last week about that, is that you can work to play, work to get the life that you leave, and there's the whole idea of work hard, play hard, or work simply, live simply,
Right.
really. And so that's kind of the deal. It's like how hard do you want to work so that you can enjoy the life that you are envisioning for yourself?
Yeah.
And that's something that every person has to answer. And again, as what you said earlier, there is no right answer, in that there's nothing wrong with somebody saying, you know what, I'm going to work 3 days a week. I'm going to live just above, what maybe the federal or the state calls poverty level, but I'm comfortable and I can spend all my time doing what I want to do.
Right.
And that's fine.
Yeah. Or on the flip side, if there are things that you're very passionate about, fashion is one of them, art,
Hmm.
antiques, right? So then you're going to have to decide, okay, make some decisions that, I'm going to work a little bit harder. I'm going to get that next level of education so I can get that next level, that next level pay raise so I can do the things I want to do. And I would say that as far as my family goes and the folks around us, it's interesting now that I'm thinking about this, and I'm sorry to be thinking about this live on, on the streaming thing. I would say that my family has made certain decisions based on the time that not only the time that we want to have available, but also we're very passionate is a overused term, but I would say that we're very passionate about what it is that we want to do. I don't want to do anything other than to talk to people about this particular
Hmm.
subject. And so in order to do that, in the decade of trying to build this business, there's a lot that we've given up to make that
Yeah.
happen. But that's another level of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not just the things you want to buy, but it's the experiences you want to have, including what you're doing for a
Yeah.
living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where the real impetus for this article came about, and this idea came about, is what about the people who feel trapped on either end of the
Yeah.
spectrum? All right. You have people who are in a low paying job for whatever reason, and they want to live a better life, but they feel that they're trapped.
Yeah.
Or there are people who are making very good money, but have no sense of wealth and no sense of value. Well, value is a strong word. They're struggling because they have this idea that they have to live this certain lifestyle that is very close to or just beyond their income level, and so
Yeah.
they're always chasing that. And both of those situations, you really need to take a hard look and decide what you want. And again, if you're happy making less money and having a free life, freer life, simpler life, great. If you want to lead a more luxurious, high standard life and you're willing to work for it, make that decision and do it. All right.
Yeah.
Don't feel, if you're feeling trapped, then you really need to stop and think where your priorities are and make sure that you have them aligned up the way that you really want. Don't just fall into it.
And I think that's the challenge, is even thinking about it, dawning on you that
Hmm.
there is another way. One of the things that we talk about a lot is what we tolerate.
Hmm.
And I think that when you're feeling down or frustrated, or instead of just having those emotions and feeling that, what can you do about it? Using that as a trigger. And that's hard though,
Hmm.
because when you're having those emotions, you're experiencing
Yeah.
those emotions. You're not necessarily thinking, um, what else can I do? And then again, there was a statistic in the PowerPoint slide or PowerPoint presentation that I did, talking about social media and talking about pressures. The Joneses syndrome is very, very real, and we do have a tendency to pattern our lives and our spending around the people that are around us. That gets amplified on social media
Oh,
when
yes.
800 of your closest friends and family members are living in a certain
Hmm.
way. And I think that it's just so very easy, again, for us to think it is the norm to dine out most of your meals. It is the norm
Yeah.
to do certain things. And I think that that is one of the most challenging things about living a savvy life is you have to you have to back out and evaluate and make decisions and do things that you don't normally do.
Yeah.
And in a busy life with demands on us, that can be
It can be
challenging.
challenging.
Yeah, totally worth it.
It is. It's really critical, because I won't say that it's a cakewalk. It's like, oh, if you just want to, if you're tired of living in poverty and you want to get better, just work harder and make more money.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's a struggle everybody goes through.
Yeah.
But it's a question of where do you focus your efforts and your creativity? If it's really important for you to be able to have a specific car or and have specific experiences, then you can focus your energies on how do I accomplish this
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah.
If it's not important to you and you're just doing it because it's part of the trapping of the social expectations, you really need to think of how important and how much energy you need to devote to that versus other things.
Yeah.
It's a really common refrain that that pops up all the time. Is nobody has ever on their deathbed said, "Gee, I sure wish I spent more time at the office."
Yeah.
And so, don't fall into the trap of just working harder and harder and harder because you feel you need to have these trappings.
One specific thing about that last statement that you made that I want to make sure that I bring up, it came up yesterday in a conversation I had with a friend. But on one end of that spectrum, the folks that are feeling like they might be trapped in a job or their particular situation, I will never, ever forget when Dante was in kindergarten or first grade. I was involved in the PTA. It was at some event. We were getting ready for it. And I started talking with a janitor, very, very nice Hispanic man, and I can't remember how it came up, but he was actually working full time and also going to school 3 nights a week, and he was trying to to get out of that situation. I had such respect for him because he wants to make change, and he's doing what he can. Education is a fantastic way to get on the other side of that. On the flip side, something has actually happened just in the last couple of days that is the opposite of that. My good friend of mine works for GoDaddy. She's in the marketing department, and they just announced that the CEO is stepping down, and he's stepping down due to health reasons. So it's not dire. It's not dire, but he knows that in order for him to get better, he's going to have to actually have a much less stressful life.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about how we live here in Silicon Valley. That was a bold move, because most that ideology. Is that the word I'm looking for? The way that we have a tendency to work here, you work until you drop at your desk, which is not healthy. And here is a guy at one of the very, very well-known company that is doing what he needs to do for his life. Now, granted, he's got plenty of money; he's going to be okay. But from the peers' perspective, we were talking about how much admiration we have for him for going ahead and doing what he needs to do to take care of himself and ultimately take care of his family. And I just love that.
And that can be very challenging. I know a large company where the main goal of this people in this company is to get to the vice president level, the director and the vice president level. And people get started on that track incredibly early. You get identified as you're going to go into this leadership program at, when you're out of school at the age of 25, people get put on that track with the goal that eventually they're going to become vice presidents and leaders of the company. My boss, who was getting ready to retire, had commented to me that most of the people who make it to vice president in this company die in office. They don't make it to retirement. They actually die in office from the stress.
And how many of them are on their second and third marriages?
And most of them are on their second and third marriages, and they're married to people that work in the company because they're the only ones who understand what's going on there. So for some people, that's the life they want to live.
Yeah, exactly. And that's fine.
Yeah, but don't fall into the trap. I guess if that would have been a good title for this session in retrospect. Don't fall into the trap. Yeah. It's figure out what you want and what really matters to you, and then start looking at how to do it. If you want to enjoy a nice, simple life that's less stress in that regard, then go ahead and pursue it, recognizing that living on a low income has its own issues and its own stresses, versus the idea of a more traditional success where you're going to have the large house and the cars and the trappings to go do all these things. Those are different level of stresses, different level of rewards. There's no right or wrong answer, except that you should pick the one that really reflects what you want.
So I believe that is the first step, and then striving towards that, whatever that looks like, and it does entail change very often. I would say that the other part of that is to create a spending plan around it. And I say that to toot our services, but I also say that because what a spending plan is a spending plan funds. it's the description of how to fund the life that you want to live. So if you're trying to strive for a certain level, you need to understand what is it going to take to get
Yes.
there. What do those expenses look like?
Yes.
We work with a lot of clients that are going into retirement, and so what their life looks like now obviously looks a little bit different later, but it gives them an understanding of what they're moving into. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
When I want to vacation, I want to go on these big vacations every year. Well, if you decide that in advance and you connect that with all of your other expenses and your spending, then it gives you an idea of what that gap is. Otherwise, again, it's like, great, okay, I've defined what I want my life to look like, but you got to have that next step of figuring out how you can afford it. And the flip side, it works the other way as well. Like how the amount of people that we've worked with that have actually wanted to downsize their careers. That's some of my favorite people to work with. And what I love about them doing that is their eyes wide open and figuring that out first versus making that jump and going,
Oops, I miscalculated. Yeah, you need to have a plan in both cases. Either how am I going to afford the vacations, the summer home, or how am I going to provide for myself and my family in my future working 3 days a week? And again, whatever you have a lot more flexibility than I think a lot of people realize. Everybody can feel trapped in their situation, and there are certainly situations and parameters that really can confine you. But with a little bit of creativity, you actually have a lot more variability and opportunity to create the life you want than a lot of people think.
Especially in this day and age, we're in if you will, a renaissance of what life can and does look like. And very often the things that we get frustrated by, like technology, are the things that actually allow us to have so much more of that flexibility. I love that my whole universe and my work with clients, all I need is a phone and a laptop and I'm good to go. I couldn't have done that 20 years ago.
Yeah, you can work from anywhere.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few people that have more traditional type jobs where they can't do that, where they have to be,
fair,
I'm building something, I need to be where the equipment is. But the fact of the matter is our economy is largely moving to a much more mobile basis, and that just gives people more opportunity. You're always going to have some jobs that require physical presence and physical work to accomplish and to create things, but the percentages are changing.
Yeah. I would say if this topic speaks to you, it may be a fun exercise to go out and either Google or go on the video version of Google on YouTube and just look at alternative careers or alternative lives. It doesn't mean you have to go off grid or anything, to that effect. But I think that when we're looking at the way other people are living, it just gives us a chance to think much broader than we would have normally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think something that I'll loop back to at the beginning is we presented this as a rather stark either or, and then immediately said, oh, but there's no right answer is where you are on the spectrum. I'll come back to that, is that the real key here for each individual is to figure out where on the spectrum you are, where it matters to you. You don't have to say, I'm going to work 80 hours a week and make $500,000 a year to afford 3 houses and 6 cars and a swimming pool, or I'm going to make $20,000 a week and live in a shack somewhere in the middle of nowhere and sew my own clothes from fiber that I grow on my plantation. There's a spectrum. And so the real question is, every time you feel that, God, I got to fork out the money for this thing, is this something you really want? Every time you're sitting there thinking, man, I can't afford this, think about where you're spending your money, how much do you really want this? Is this really important to you? And start looking at where we can figure out how to change that.
Yeah. I think we've done a pretty good job on this topic.